Hey, welcome back to my channel. I am Yelizaveta. In my last video, somebody rightfully pointed out that in my discussion of the molinete, I did not really address the fact that when you execute the molinete, you have to pivot. So in this lesson and the next one, we're going to look at what makes up the pivoting technique in tango and why. And if you end up liking what you learn and want to know how to actually apply this in your dance with tango music, then check out my upcoming special topic webinar that I'll be doing on November 18th. The link is in the show notes. This webinar is part of my I'm So Tango School Online membership. So if you are already a member, this is included. But if you're not, you get a 30-day free trial. So check it out and you can join the webinar and you can explore the rest of the program. And I hope I see you in there. So to start our discussion on the pivots, I want to point out that I'm using a wooden dowel here, which if you don't have a dowel, you might have a broomstick that also works. And in the exercises that I'm going to show in this video, I suggest that when you try them at home, you also use something like this to help you. Why? Because when we dance tango, we're never dancing on our own. So even though maybe it's a great thing to practice movements that you do in tango like pivots and ochos by yourself as an exercise in balance and your tenacity, ultimately you're not really gonna ever do those movements strictly on your own. You're always going to be doing them in relation to a partner. And in this case, this becomes your partner. So it gives you a little bit of a truer experience of what the movement is actually going to feel like when you do this. So that's why I recommend that you use this when practicing your pivots. All right, so let's discuss first why pivots are even part of tango and why they're so important. On the surface, it's the aesthetics. If I'm doing ochos and I begin to pivot forward, and at this point, I don't pivot my foot, but I start pivoting around, my foot is going to end up in this position. So the reason why we pivot is because aesthetically speaking, we are trying to the best of our ability to keep the alignment of the foot in this position in relation to the rest of the body. So I'm trying, if I were to just take a cast of the foot that I want, it'd be this shape of the leg. And if it was on the heel, it'd be here. So this is the shape that I want, and I want this shape to be there all the time. So when I'm pivoting and I'm circling, I want this shape on my foot and this shape on my leg. So if I go into a pivot here, this is the shape that I want. So as I begin my pivot, I keep the leg in this same shape. No matter how long I pivot, I still keep this foot in the same shape, the leg in the same alignment. This not only looks better, but there's also a function to it too that more has to do with longevity. When you are starting to pivot, you're starting to torque your bones. And in order to keep your joints healthy, you want to minimize the amount of torque because your knee joint and your ankle joint were not designed for torque. If I begin to pivot, so I'm pivoting to this direction, but I don't pivot my foot first. Notice here, my direction, I'm going this way, but my knee is actually stuck. So I'm creating an area of torque along this path. And in the end, it wears down the joint and creates injury down the line. So when I am going into something like molinete, and my goal is to go a forward and a side, The idea is that I step, and this shape of the foot is what I'm going to retain once I go into my side step. So that's why there's a pivot to allow for that. And so here is my final shape. Once I transfer, and then now I'm building up for a back pivot, once again, I'm going to say to myself, my alignment of my standing foot is not going to change. And that way, as I arrive, this leg is still aligned the same way. Because we're making this requirement that the foot always looks a certain way, we have to pivot, and you want to imagine that that pivot is really happening at the level of the foot. So sometimes I use this image that I'm standing on top of jar lids and I'm unscrewing the jar. I'm pushing into the floor and unscrewing the lid as I pivot. So that intentionality of the pivot coming from the floor is what creates the dynamic where you can actually modulate the speed of the pivot, which is what we're going to explore in the webinar on November 18th. In Molinete, you have two main pivots that we do in Tango a lot. You have the forward ocho and the back ocho alignment. For this class, we're going to just talk about the forward ocho. So if we just isolate the forward step, and instead of pivoting and going side for the Molinete, because remember, the Molinete is forward, side, then back and side. So instead of going all the way around after the forward step, if I just pivot to walk forward again, we now have forward ochos. And so if you notice how I'm actually doing these, I'm using the dowel to help myself balance, and I'm really focusing on keeping all of my joints very soft. The most important part of pivoting and being more balanced is your posture. The balance that you feel is not something that you have to force by gripping or holding your bones a certain way. It's something that you just ride as your body goes. And the only thing that you need to think of, especially if you're doing practice like this or with the partner where you're in an open embrace, is that you remain very vertical. For some people, you think you're vertical, but you're actually here to start. So when the pivot begins, there's already a falling forward and you're not clear on why you might be losing your balance. So if you feel that falling forward sensation, realize it needs to be more back. Sometimes I imagine that as I go into the ocho, it's like somebody is still pulling me back through this C7 line by my shirt. So as I step forward, I still feel a lot of energy back. Now this, of course, is just an exercise where you feel more confident and balanced. Because as you see here, like I can do this with my eyes closed and feel fairly relaxed in my balance and in where I am spatially, because I have this as a reference. So now I will show you an exercise that you can do at home with the dowel. I will demonstrate with the song how you can practice Molinete and then isolating the ochos. And the most important piece of this is not how it looks, it's how it feels for you, because at the end of this exercise, it should feel like you can do this with your eyes closed very comfortably without doubting or questioning your balance. So check out this little demo and I'll see you in a minute. now it's your turn. Take a dowel, put on a song that you really like, and just practice isolating the ochos and doing them in as much of a comfortable way that makes you feel much more empowered and balanced than you ever could imagine before. And bonus points if you actually make a video of yourself. And of course, don't watch that right away. Wait a few days before you watch it for best impression. Now, join me next week because in the next lesson, I'm going to tell you about the 3 types of ochos that you can have. So the way that you can modulate your pivots and what are the tools that you have in your body to change the dynamics of how your pivots actually feel to the leader. So if you're not subscribed yet to this channel, go ahead and do so. I hope I see you in the next lesson. And don't forget to check out the link to the webinar on November 18th. It's in the show notes. I'll see you next time. Ciao.